So at Current World Events, I have been noticing a greater number of customers looking to book cruises on this side of the globe. And so when I came across the itinerary on the Azamara Pursuit in November this year, from Singapore through to Sydney, I thought I would bring it to your attention. So in March, I was lucky enough to be on board the Azamara Pursuit when she was in Sydney, and I have to admit that getting on board here, I was a bit skeptical because prior to COVID, the pricing had always been a lot higher than what I was currently seeing. And so I wondered, because during that time they have changed ownership. So I was wondering if there was a change in direction as to what they were offering, whether the ships were being maintained as well, and so the prices have been lowered to reflect that. But actually what it appears is that the new owners are just going more on a price strategy that is going to fill each and every sailing, which is still only 700 guests at max capacity. And I suppose they have also doubled the size of the fleet since before COVID, because they only used to have the Quest and the Journey, and they now also have the Onwards and the Pursuit. So that obviously is also going to have an impact in the availability that they have, the number of rooms to fill, and that kind of thing. So it was actually I was really pleasantly surprised when I did get on board her, and the first thing I noticed getting on board was the carpets are pristine, everything is being really well maintained. The crew were incredible, the food was great, and I did make the point of asking the question with regards to the inclusions, have they changed? Because I said, your pricing is not as high as what it used to be. And they said, no, it's still the exact same inclusions, and I have checked since and it is. So pretty much all inclusive with the exception of the excursions. Which I know for some guests they do like to have everything all included, but one thing that I have noticed and to keep in mind, so when cruise lines include the excursions, they still only have a maximum dollar amount that you can spend on those excursions, which can sometimes mean that maybe the cruise lines where you pay for the excursions, you're actually getting either more to choose from or a better quality because you're actually paying for it, so they haven't got to find things that fit within a certain dollar value. So for those of you who haven't heard of Azamara and haven't sailed on them before, I'd describe them as a small ship premium cruise line, and probably more understated than some of the other smaller ships, smaller cruise lines, in the sense that I would say they are quite practical rather than glamorous. You're not going to find big atriums with Swarovski chandeliers and big massive sweeping staircases to walk down in glamorous gowns in the evening. Azamara are all about the destination. They're a really comfortable ship to get you to where you're going in a nice way. They are small, so they don't have a lot of public spaces on them. They'll have a couple of lounges, a couple of bars, a couple of restaurants, but other than that there's not really a huge amount. I mean, yes, you've got the pool and the spa and the fitness centre, but really they are your accommodation while you are exploring. I would say homely in their style and the way the ship feels. They have big enough corridors that you don't feel crowded, but not so big that it's overwhelming. They are very homely in every sense, is what I sort of got from the way the stairways are done to the rooms themselves and even the public spaces as well. So as I said, they have 4 ships, the Quest, the Journey, the Originals, and then the Onwards and the Pursuit. Now they do all come from the same design. So although they've each had independent lives, and Azamara only took over the Pursuit in 2018, She was actually built in 2001. So all of the ships, they are sister ships, although they've all went to different cruise lines originally, and the 4 of them are now back together under Azamara. So you will, and even the styling and the decor. So when I was on the Quest in 2017, I think, somewhere around then, when I got on the Pursuit, it was, you know, the same colours, the same styling. It did look like I'd walked back on the same ship. So each one is pretty much the same. They all have around the 700 guest capacity and roughly 400 crew. Now, side note and fun fact on the crew, what they actually found through their research with their past guests is that there are a lot of repeat guests who will only sail with certain crew members, and so what they've actually had to start doing is moving the crew around the different ships throughout the season, so that then they'll get the guests going to Alaska with them on one of the ships, and then the Mediterranean in the other, and then so on, because otherwise the guests were just staying in the same region. So I knew they always had a very good following with their crew, but I didn't really think it was quite that intense where the customers literally wouldn't do an itinerary if that crew member wasn't on it. So obviously that is really great when it comes to the feedback for the crew. So having spent the last 4 years working for river cruise companies, I would say that Azamara for me definitely feel the closest on the oceans to what a river cruise is. You know, they are not about many sea days. They are not about the ship being the destination and having lots of things on board to do. They are really about having a really nice, comfortable place to come back to and spending as much time ashore as possible. So being smaller, they'll get into places that other ships can't go to. They also typically will stay longer in port and many more overnights on each itinerary. So as I said, Azamara Pursuit was originally built in 2001, and having had a few previous lives, she is now nearly 25 years old. And as I said, absolutely looking fantastic for a 25-year-old ship. You know, there are other cruise lines, P&O and Carnival, where, you know, when their ships get older, you certainly start to see that they are older ships. Obviously, their price absolutely reflects that. If you look at Carnival's newer ships, the price per day, and then their older ships, the price per day, there's a dramatic difference because of the way the ships are maintained. But with Azamara, the Pursuit, when I was on board, everything was beautiful, and like say, when you see the feedback, there isn't really a lot of feedback which you can get where you know, saying lots of delays into port or the engines broke down or that kind of thing. So they definitely do keep them well. And I suppose when you have only got 4 ships, it is much easier than Carnival, who I think 25-30 ships. You know, maintaining that fleet is quite a bit different. So they took her over in 2018, and with the Azamara Forward, all of the ships are going to be redone, I would say, in a superficial way. So it's more styling and changing some of the colours to make them a little bit lighter, particularly on the Pursuit. So a bit of a facelift by 2029, but even now she looks fantastic. So the itinerary. So this one is a 20-night itinerary from Singapore to Sydney, and I think we can all agree that when it comes to Singapore, easy is the word that comes to mind. So it's generally an easy flight. You know, from myself in Sydney, it's about 7.5 hours. Melbourne and Tasmania are a bit further, but when we're coming to Brisbane and Perth, you know, it's purely a couple of hours flight. So it's quite an easy place to fly to. And Changi Airport is also very easy. Transport is very easy. They speak English, so that's very easy. It's just easy. And also with this itinerary, because the first night, actually the first 2 nights are in Singapore, you do have the option, which is quite rare, to actually fly in for the day of the cruise. So I think out of Sydney there's usually about a 6 a.m. flight, which will get you there at 2-3 in the afternoon. I personally prefer the 3 o'clock in the afternoon flight that leaves Sydney and gets you there about 9:30. So if you do prefer those afternoon flights, then you can always fly in the day before that and stay overnight in a hotel. But if you just want to get there and you just want to board the ship, it is possible with this itinerary. But as I said, Azamara are about the destination, so of course they do offer some really great pre-stays. The first one is just your normal sort of 2-night city tour, city stay with a day of touring and or do your own thing. But there's two that actually really stand out to me, and one of them is In Search of Orangutans in Borneo, and I'll read you the description because they've done a really good description here. So they say it's a unique to Azamara immersive experience in Borneo, the third largest island in the world, shared by Malaysia, Indonesia and Brunei. While you're here, you'll visit the Sepalok Orangutan Rehabilitation Centre, where you'll see these beautiful beasts roam in the rainforest. You'll also visit the Bornean Sun Bear Conservation Centre, the only one of its kind in the world, helping to preserve these vulnerable species unique to Southeast Asia, before heading deep into the jungle for walking expeditions, river cruises, and educational sessions with naturalists. And then the other option is the mystical Nepal, blessings, bazaars, and timeless beauty, which obviously completely different to the other options, but for different interests, it's a really great alternative. So this one is: the tiny country of Nepal lies amidst the snow-capped mountains of the Himalayas, with its verdant hills and towering snowy peaks. Kathmandu, the country's capital, is nestled in a lush valley surrounded by incredible peaks and filled with ancient shrines and palaces. This program takes you to Kathmandu, the capital, reputed to be the origin of the legend of Shangri-La. This is a land of ravishing beauty and is culturally rich in history and tradition. So the next day you are at sea, which is a really great opportunity to see, so you've had your 2 days beforehand, you've then got 2 nights, 2 days on the ship, and you can use it as a come and go into Singapore, or you can stay on board. I think most people will be using it as time to see Singapore. But the third day is the day that you're going to be at sea, and really a great way to see where you're going to be spending the next 17 nights at this point, the people you're going to be traveling with, checking out the ship, and just getting to know the lay of the land. It's a small ship, so it's not going to take you too long, but a nice relaxing day just to settle in. And particularly if you've done one of the extensions beforehand, it's probably a good day to catch up and relax. So after that, you're going to be arriving into Semarang, which is a perfect example of their extended stays. So you're going to be arriving in at 7 a.m. and you're not leaving until 8 p.m. So I'm not going to read you all of the excursions, but I will link them below so that you can have a look at what they are. So you're going to have a mix of tours, sightseeing, private tours, Chinese temples, rail rides up into the highlands, and with the longer time in port, it means that you can get the excursions. I think one of them is up to 10 hours, so getting you quite far inland actually to see those things that you don't necessarily get to do when, say, you're only in port for 5 to 6 hours. So the next day is the city of Surabaya. So they don't really have a lot of excursions here, which makes me believe that there's actually a lot to do in and around the port. They do say that there is the Arab Quarter, which is a bit like a Middle Eastern Medina, which at the moment, with travel to the Middle East being a bit up and down, is probably a nice way to get a bit of that experience without actually going there. It's supposed to have a warren of narrow lanes and stalls and prayer beads and perfumes and dates, and I suppose we all can kind of think of those bazaars that you would see in the Middle Eastern countries, but here in Indonesia instead. So after this, you're going to cruise through to Selukan, Bawang, which is in Bali's north coast. And I've had a read through the excursions here. So, and again, it appears there's going to have quite a range of experiences with the excursions, such as the Manduka Highlands, which is the lakes. You visit the Parua Luana Danyu Temple and discover the healing properties. Alternatively, completely different from the Highlands, you can also go snorkeling, and you go to a resort with views, and also the West Bali National Park, which is said to have a lot of unique wildlife. You'll also notice as well when you have a look through the excursions that they've got a range of them for different abilities, so whether you want an easy pace, a quicker pace, or even strenuous when it comes to the activity level. So the next day you're in Bali, and this one actually has 13 different options. So you'll be able to experience it really in a way that suits you. And I suppose that's another really great thing about Azamara. When you're looking through the excursions, you're not going to just be temples here, temples there, or, you know, city tour, city tour, city tour. You know, one day you can be snorkeling, and then here, for example, you can do cooking classes, or you could go up into the Highlands with the rail in Samarang. So there's so many different types, so that also means that each day is going to be different, and when you're looking back on it, you're not going to go, gosh, where was it that we did that? Because you can actually have different experiences and do different activities in pretty much all of the places. So the next day is a sea day, and I think for me personally, this is actually a really perfect place to break it up, because once you've done sort of 4 or 5 days of busy days of exploring, you know, having a day where you can just chill and relax and read a book, or sort the photos out into their albums, or whatever it is that you like to do, just take that day to really relax and get ready for the rest of the trip. So after that, you do arrive into Australia again via Darwin. So here you have the opportunity to see Darwin itself, or head out into some of the parks that they have up there in the top end. After this, you do have 3 days at sea, and I know I've said that Azamara, when it comes to the onboard experience, to not have lots of days at sea, but this is obviously not going to be just days and days at sea. You are the top end of Australia, going from Darwin through to Cairns, so there's going to be, I imagine, a lot of opportunities for seeing how the top end, the landscapes change. They'll probably have some talks and people to do some information on where you are, and obviously any bird spotters. I imagine there'll be some sort of wildlife, whales possibly, although I think whales are more around the other way if my geography is correct. But they will definitely have a lot of things to do. So you're not at sea, you are on the boat, on the ship, sorry, cruising around the top end, and most probably keeping as close to the shore as possible, so that you'll see a lot of the scenery changing. So we finally get into Cairns, and Cairns is an overnight stay, and this is where they do the As Amazing evening, which is always the highlight for every single guest. And on this particular one, we have our very own Kate Sobrano, so Australia's Kate Sobrano, who will be on there delivering pop, jazz and soul at the Cairns Convention Centre, which you'll go to after you've had your beautiful dinner on board. So after the 2 days in Cairns, you're going to sail to Airlie Beach, where of course it's all about the beaches and the waters. And if you're going to do a small plane anywhere, I would say this is probably the place to do it, with such beautiful scenery to be flying over in this part of our country. And then we're coming to almost the end of the cruise, so you're going to have another sea day, then it will be Mooloolaba, a sea day, before you arrive in Sydney, and you actually have overnight in Sydney. So for those people who are not from New South Wales, Sydney, obviously a really fantastic opportunity. If you can get on, they probably usually do a Blue Mountains excursion. To be honest, I live in Sydney, so I actually didn't check the excursions, but they will be listed in the description below. They usually do the Blue Mountains and that kind of thing, which the overnight is perfect for, because it is probably an hour and a half, 2 hours to get up to Katoomba to see the Three Sisters, and so obviously the same on the way back. So you don't want to be rushing, and so for those people from the rest of the country who want to use an opportunity to do that, it's perfect. Anyone who is in Sydney, obviously you can go to Sydney or you can stay on board the ship. It is entirely up to you. So she does usually dock in White Bay, which does give you the wonderful opportunity to sail under the harbour bridge as the sun's coming up, which is always obviously very beautiful. We're very blessed here to have such a beautiful port, sailing past the Opera House and under the harbour bridge. But when I was in Sydney in March, she was docked at Circular Quay, and she was so small that I completely missed that she was docked at Circular Quay, and drove all the way around to White Bay to have to come all the way back to Circular Quay. So she does occasionally get docked there, but most of the time round at White Bay. And for those who live in Sydney, probably Melbourne and Tasmania as well, this is probably the end of the trip with a flight home. People might want to, if you're going to Perth or Brisbane or Darwin or Adelaide, you might want to consider looking at one of their post-cruise extensions, and one of them is the Uluru, the Spirit of Australia, which obviously for those in Perth and Brisbane's kind of a bit of a detour, but for people in Perth it's the perfect way to sort of stop on the way home if you do want to add on that little bit extra travel time and see the Red Centre as part of the end of the tour and sort of a final farewell. So I hope you have found this introduction to Azamara and the itinerary overview of value to you in your cruise research. If you are interested in booking this cruise, I've linked it below, or any of the other Azamara, Indonesia, Australian cruises. You'll also find many options, of course, every available cruise around the world from all of the major cruise lines on our global cruise finder. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below and I'll get back to you there. Finally, if you are based here in Australia and you would like to book this cruise or any other cruise with myself personally, you can also book an appointment via the website, which is linked below. Thank you.